you lost an uncle?
I did. Completely, as I said, our experiences are the same but different. I lost my uncle in the 90s. I'm from a small western Kentucky town. If you think Louisville is years behind, where I'm from is probably
Sure.
50. So in the 90s, my uncle, who was semi-out to my family, he was shunned, even though he was the most successful member of our family. Not bashing what people do for work, but he was probably the only person who had a successful job, a loving partner, a home that he owned. He was the picture of success for my family. We come from poverty, so I was raised in a trailer park. My other mother's siblings lived the same lifestyle, but because he was gay, he was shunned. He was the black sheep of the family, even though he could have absolutely turned a blind eye to his trashy family. But when we got the diagnosis that he had HIV, I was a child, I didn't understand it. I just knew that my uncle was sick and none of my family wanted to be around him. By the time he had succumbed to AIDS, he was living at my grandparents' house, which was conveniently next door to my mom's house. It was literally, we called it going up the hill. Our trailer was down here, grandma's house was right up here. So he was always right there. And my mother, they were very close in age. She was the only member of our family who acknowledged his existence and acknowledged that he was sick because of why he was sick. I remember being a very small child and me laying in his bed and one of my uncles coming in and saying to my mom, "What are you doing? Get her out of that bed. She's gonna get sick now." And even though it was the 90s and we were so far behind, my mom knew that was not true. And almost an act of defiance, and this is like so vivid in my brain, I remember my mom letting me drink Sprite out of a cup that he had drank out of. It seemed so small, but then it was so huge.
Right.
I mean, they would say you would get it from drinking fountains or just sitting in a chair that someone had sat in. So my mom was the only person that showed kindness in his final days. And I hate to say, but his partner, they remained separate because we were so, he was worried that he was going to get sick too. My mom stays in contact with him, but I don't know if he ever contracted anything. I don't know if he is still alive. That much I don't know, but I do know that the time he spent with my uncle was beautiful, and I'm sad it ended so quickly. The final few days, my mom was his caregiver through it all, and I was her little minion, just waiting to see what I could do to help. And my mom would go to the bathroom with him. My mom would do everything for him, because at the end, he was just absolutely a skeleton of a human. And there was no treatment, there was no hope, there was no, it almost feels like sometimes we're still there, even though I know we've made leaps and bounds, but it seems like it's just been forgotten about.
Right.
I know that people like that, like us who have experienced it, we still fight, but it seems like, oh, it was just an epidemic that happened in the 80s and 90s. People still aren't dying from this, and that's absolutely not true. But his final days, my mom held his hand through it all, and she has never recovered. She has never recovered from the hate she saw from the rest of my family. There's always been a break, essentially, in that relationship, where they abandoned their brother because of something they didn't understand. And I truly get that, it's backwards, it's redneck culture, and it's even hard for them to accept gay people these days, let alone someone who has HIV or AIDS. So almost 30 years ago, oh my God.
Right.
But
it wasn't just small town Kentucky, right? When the AIDS epidemic hit, I can remember being a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I had just learned to drive, and they're talking about it on the radio, and they're calling it this gay disease. I think they refer to it as GRID, GRID,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was rampant in like San Francisco and New York.
Of course, the towns where
Right.
gay people
And
go.
like, I can remember driving and saying to myself, that is never going to come
to Kentucky.
to Kentuckiana. It won't happen. Won't happen. But even in those cities, there was such fear
Mm-hmm.
of the people living with this. Ambulances wouldn't take them to the hospital. Family members wouldn't eat after them, drink after
Yeah.
them. They would make them use disposable, cups and plates and forks, and and we've come a long way, but there are still these small towns, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I think that outlook, that sentiment is still very prevalent.
Yeah. I mean, even now, the remaining members of my family do not talk about my uncle. Even though it's been 30 years, they don't talk about him. His memory was completely just turned to ash, except for me and my mother. My younger siblings, they were not alive whenever was still with us. My older siblings, they were rough boys, they couldn't care less and they didn't understand it either. Despite my silliness, the compassion that I've always had, even as a child, I understood it. But that was the only compassion that he received was from me and my mother. So even now, they don't talk about why he died, why he was sick. I lost my grandma this year, and that was her son. She never spoke of him. She never, even though he died in her home, she never spoke about it. She loved him, of course,
Sure.
but she didn't ever want to truly admit to why he died. So it's that stigma and that hush-hush, which is so dangerous. The not talking about it is so dangerous. Because if you ignore it, it's not going to go away. And that's
Exactly.
with your brother. He tried to ignore it.
Yep.
And try to pretend this isn't happening to me. And so many people are still doing that. They're ignoring it and thinking, it can't be me. I can't get AIDS. No. There are so many, cis hetero men who are like, I'm not getting AIDS. That doesn't affect people like me. And the sad truth is, yes, it still does.
Yeah, it's actually growing.
Absolutely.
Right? So.
Absolutely.